leave, we have a couple of passages here where Daru really hopes that he could just get out of the situation. He talks about being amazed when he thinks of the possibility that the Arab may have just walked out and run away. But as the pages turn, we start to see developing a little bit of a bond between the two men. You see, Daru treats him as another human being, right? He offered him tea before. Now he's making him a meal. The prisoner wants to find out if Daru is going to eat with him. And he asks, "Are you the judge?" And Daru says, "No, I'm simply keeping you until tomorrow. But why do you eat with me?" And Daru has a very sort of dry response, "Because I'm hungry," right? But they're developing a sort of, sorry guys, this certainly wasn't the way I wanted our last session to end before the Easter break. But sometimes we have to just roll with the punches, right? I know that we were trying to do the last portion of the guests together, and it looks as if Schoology is down, and we may not be able to meet as a conference together. And so therefore, I'm just going to try to give you the conclusion to the story and at least hit on some of the important details that we discussed yesterday and some that we can discuss moving forward. Number one, we said that this story from Albert Camus is definitely one that falls under the category of existentialism. The idea that life in and of itself has no meaning until you make the choices that help to determine the meaning of your life. And we also said that existentialism very often reflects a universe that has no sense of feeling towards the individual. So the setting of Algeria, particularly the place where Daru finds himself in the schoolhouse, is very fitting. He is isolated and alone on at the schoolhouse. He is on top of the plateau. There is a vast expanse that surrounds him. He can see Balducci and the Arab coming up the hill towards him, but he in and of himself is all by himself. He's in the room alone. He has been that way for the last 3 days. The weather has been quite extreme. They've just had 3 days of blizzard, and prior to that, there were 8 months of drought. From one extreme to another, I suppose you could say. Daru is very much concerned because he remembers the drought. He remembers how the plateaus were burned to cinder. He remembers how the stones were turned to dust, that the earth was shriveled up. He even mentions how sheep died by the thousands and even quite a few people, but no one cared. So nature does not care about you at all. She's completely indifferent, right? The region, he says, was cruel to live in, even without men who didn't help matters either. And so Daru, in this particular setting, is isolated and alone and inconsequential. Who are the big players in the story? Well, obviously, in terms of characters, we have our main character, Daru. He serves a twofold purpose. We know that he's both a school teacher and he's the person responsible for distributing the food to the students. He's very concerned over the fact that for 3 days the kids have not been able to come to school. He has about 20 pupils and he knows that they're probably starving. He's a representative of the French government, and so he's not necessarily one of them. Ironically, on the blackboard from 3 days ago are the 4 rivers of France flowing to their estuaries, as we read, right? Some things, I guess, that they would never even have to deal with or even know about, and yet it's still on the board. Balducci is the Italian gendarme, and he has arrived at the schoolhouse as a representative of the government. And he has tethered to a rope an Arab prisoner. We found out yesterday that Balducci, the police officer, knows that there's going to be a possible uprising in El Amur. There's been some talk of revolt, and things are very, very tense. So this prisoner, who's guilty of murder, he killed his cousin, I believe, over food, has to be brought to Tinguit. And Balducci can't do that because he's got to maintain peace in El Amur. And so he has arrived at the schoolhouse because he's going to be asking Daru to take over from here. Of course, this is something that Daru doesn't want to do, and thus we come to the concept of existentialism. He does not really want to be put in this situation. He's trying to make a choice by telling Balducci, it's not my job. I want to be absolved of responsibility. It's not my responsibility, essentially. But as we know, as the story goes on, that's not going to be the case. As Balducci gets ready to bond with each other, you might say, and Daru is disgusted by the idea of the violence. Why did you kill him? Why did you kill your cousin? And he says, he ran away. And I ran after him. Do you know what they're going to do to me? And without answering his direct question, Daru just says, are you afraid? Are you sorry? But the Arab just stares at him open mouthed. Now, maybe it's a question of translation, but it just sort of hangs in the air. But the Arab continues to talk about other things. He says, is the policeman going to come back tomorrow? I don't know. Well, are you coming with us? I don't know. Why? And then he repeats, come with us. Is that because he's starting to have a sort of respect for Daru? Because Daru is treating him with such kindness. And or is he talking at large about the revolution, the rebellion? Come with us, be on our side, as the natives are going up against the French. Remember, we're talking about a colonial situation here, and it's based on truth. You know, the people who are of Algeria, the natives themselves, as represented by the Arabs, or the Arab in this story, are going against the colonial government, the French, right, as represented by Daru. But Daru is anything but a representative of the government at times, because he's treating him as an equal. And of course, as night falls, Daru prepares a place for him to sleep, and he mentions something that you see in Stephen Crane with the open boat. Strangely enough, in tough times, there starts to exist a sort of brotherhood between men, particularly prisoners and soldiers, Daru says. Something where they actually start to have this strange alliance with one another. Maybe they actually start to identify with each other, that we're really just humans underneath it all, and we're not much different from one another. In any case, during the middle of the night, Daru hears the Arab heading toward the door. And in a weird way, he starts to get excited because he thinks, oh my goodness, he's running away. And that will leave him the option of not having to make a choice. Daru will basically, not have to do anything. The guy will just escape. But he doesn't. All he simply did was go outdoors to relieve himself, and he winds up coming back. And in the morning, they prepare to depart. As they're getting ready, we have a little foreshadowing here that some of you may have picked up on, because they're starting to leave the schoolhouse, and Daru says he thought he heard a slight sound behind him, and he retraced his steps, but there was no one there. We know later on that the friends of the Arab have been lurking in the shadows, probably looking at Daru and wondering, what is this guy doing with our friend? Of course, at the end, these people that were sort of skulking about will leave a nasty message on the blackboard. So we get to the final 2 pages, and they begin their walk to Tinguit. And Daru stops and says, hey, and he hands out this package. And he says, take it. There are dates and bread and sugar. It'll be enough for 2 days. And here's some money, too, 1,000 francs. If you look to the east, he says, there's the way to the jail. You have a 2-hour walk. You'll find the police. They're expecting you. But if you look to the south and you follow that trail, in a day's walk, you're going to come across another nomadic tribe. They'll take you in and shelter you. And now goodbye, I'm leaving you. For a while, the Arab just sort of stands there. He doesn't do anything. And Daru was mad. So he actually climbs back to take a look, and sure enough, when he sees the Arab, in that slight haze, Daru, with a heavy heart, makes out that he's going to Tinguit to turn himself in. By the time Daru gets back to his classroom, there's a nasty message on the board where those French rivers were sprawled. And the message comes from the Arab's friends. You handed over our brother, and you will pay for this. Daru looked at the sky and the plateau, and in this vast landscape, he was very much alone. You see, he's exiled from both groups now. He's exiled from the French because he insulted Balducci. And he told him he wasn't really keen on doing the job that he was supposed to do. And clearly, the Arab's friends have misinterpreted what Daru has done. The Arabs hate him because they think he brought their friend to the prison. And so, while trying not to make a choice, Daru has actually made a choice, and that has granted meaning to his life. And what is his life going to be about? Loneliness and isolation. The last bit I want to leave with you is the idea that the name of this story in French is Les Hôtes. And in English, when we translate it, we only can translate it into the guest. And certainly it is about the Arab, the prisoner, I should say. Let's not draw a line there. Let's just say it certainly is about the Arab himself, for sure. He makes a choice. Maybe he chooses to go to the prison because Daru was kind to him, and he certainly doesn't want Daru to suffer. Maybe he creates meaning in his life because he wants to atone for the sin of murdering his cousin. But the really neat thing about the word les hôtes in French means both guest and host. And so from that perspective, we look not only at the Arab and how his choices will define the meaning of his life, but also of Daru's choices, and his decision not to make a decision is still making a choice. And now his life will be forever isolated, even more so than it was before. Okay? Again, this doesn't really take the place of a conference because I wanted to hear your voices and have you read, but at least I can send you this and you would have a conclusion to the story. Again, apologies for all the quirks and glitches during the course of the week with Schoology, but please know that you're always in my prayers and that I wish you all a very blessed Easter, and I certainly hope that we will be together again, class of 2020. You guys are a spectacular group, and we all miss you. Okay, farewell.